Hey everyone, and welcome back to the next installment in our ongoing Retrospective Figure Showcase series, where we'll look back at some older figures in my collection, including some that I've never fully unboxed. Now, this is such a case, and for today's installment, we'll be looking at the Art Figures Soldier of Fortune. And that's it as far as names go. No other interesting names or attempts from Art Figures here. And in case you are wondering who it is, it's supposed to be. This is meant to be the character called Lee Christmas, played by Jason Statham in the Expendables 2. And I just felt like we were primed for a review like this, especially with the drop of the trailer for the upcoming fourth movie in the series. Now, at some point, maybe closer to the release of that film, we'll look at the Hot Toys Barney Ross, Sylvester Stallone figure from the first movie. Besides that, though, what can I say about the franchise and these figures? I'll say that I'm surprised no one did licensed figures besides the Stallone ones we got from Hot Toys. I mean, Art Figures did the Statham character we're looking at today, and I think they did the Dolph Lundgren as well, and the JCVD Jean Valjean. Oh, and I do think they also did a version of the Antonio Banderas character from the third movie. So at least they did show the line a little bit of love. But what about Jet Li? What about Terry Crews or Randy Couture? What about Wesley Snipes from the third movie, or even Arnold as Trench? Or dare I ask for Chuck Norris from that second movie? But maybe there just wasn't support for these figures. I mean, I think the movies, at least the first two, were very much meant to appeal to those of us who love those 80s and early 90s action movies. So I think there was maybe, I don't want to say there's a limited appeal to them, but there was a very targeted audience for these. And I think we'll have to see what happens with this next Expendables movie. Honestly, I would be interested in seeing someone like Damn Toys pick up the line and really apply that military figure skill they have, but we'll see. And I will say, I really enjoyed the movies. They're not going to win any awards, but it was great to see such a mix of great action stars. And I think that was a little of what was missing in the third movie. So with that preamble done, let's take a look at this figure here and all of the items included with it. Now, besides the figure, you basically get a kit very similar to a military figure release, just not inclusive of all the accessories those figures tend to include. For example, there's no comm gear, and even the vest doesn't really include any pouches for spare mags or any other equipment. So it has some things in common with those types of figures, but more in the way you're supposed to kit up the set instead of the actual accessories. But you do get some recreation of items we saw in the movie. Case in point, the knives and the holsters or sheaths for those. And one thing you'll see, no spare hands here, but that's because the figure comes with two unique hands that we'll discuss a little bit later on. But let's start by looking more closely at the pieces he does include, and we'll kick things off with his AR style rifle. And first of all, it's very compact, but does include a working stock that can extend out as well as working action. The top rail comes with the iron sights that can actually be folded up or down, and there is a slight laser attachment at the lower rail. Now, this piece does also include two additional elements. One is the red dot sight that can actually slide onto the top rail, and the other is a single point sling that does include a bungee type cord to give you some stretch. Overall, it's a nice looking weapon that serves as his primary, although the front of the gun isn't really accurate to the movie. In the movie, I think there's actually a side mounted flashlight attachment, but even with that, it's a nice looking piece that even opens up fully. So again, a nicely detailed 6 scale rifle that has a lot of the functionality we'd see with military figures. Now, you also get a secondary weapon, which is his pistol. Now, I think this is a Beretta style one, and Art Figures does include a spare clip, but like I mentioned at the start, there's really no place to store it. So it would have been nice to get something to hold it. But as far as the details go, it's a nice looking sidearm with pretty decent paint apps showing a little weathering and making sure this doesn't come across like just a chunk of plastic. And it does come with a holster, although you will notice this does have some straps to it, which are intended to actually get woven into his tactical vest. So a little uniqueness there as well. Next, you get 2 grenades that look good with some dark green metallic paint apps, actual metal pins, and some very small yellow text imprinted on the side. And again, these get hooked onto the vest and they look really good. Now, the next pieces are familiar to you if you've seen the movies. Lee is basically an expert with knives, and they are his preferred weapon, so he carries a ton of them on him. And they have that nice slender handle terminating in an open ring, which in the sequel Lee uses to really, rotate these and spin these around in his fingers. and throw them all over the place. Here, looking at the figure, the nice thing is these are actual metal. So I always think that's a nice plus, since you'll avoid breaking them or having to be too gentle with them. And I like that the handle is actually wrapped with a fabric string to give it a little more realism. Paint at the edges is a little chipped. I will say I think that's more of a paint application issue, but it does make the edge stand out a little bit here, so I'll accept it. Now, next you get some actual gear that he has to equip. So first, you do get the tactical vest, which includes tons of locations to add in packs and holsters, etc. And that is very accurate to the movie. And then you do get a belt that basically holds his butt pack and the 2 leg drop down knife sheaths, adding to the figure's tactical look. And I do like those leg knife holders because they again help to make the figure feel a little unique. Now, detail work on the vest and the packs are pretty amazing. And the pack does have some foam inserts, but of course, I think that's ultimately where I'll end up storing the spare rifle mags and the spare clip for the pistol. Now, the last piece here is the beret that, again, very much goes with the character. I mean, he's wearing it in the poster for the movie, so I think it was essential to get that. It is a fabric piece with a nice leather-like band. However, I am concerned about paint rub on the sculpt in the long run. That was an issue with the Barney Ross figure, and unfortunately on mine the forehead does have those dark stains on it because I did leave the headgear on for a little bit longer. With that headpiece equipped, he looks fine. Without it, it's unfortunately pretty noticeable. Now, speaking of sculpts, let's take a look at what Art Figures is giving us here. And yeah, this is a bit of a stumble. Look, there's a lot of great detail work here. The texture on the skin, with the wrinkles on his forehead, texture on his chin, as well as the facial hair. There's a lot of good here, but the question becomes, does it look like Jason Statham? I think this is one of those sculpts that if you squint and look really hard, you'll definitely know who it is. I think the biggest issue I see, it's just too elongated. Is it the worst sculpt I've seen? No, but it's definitely not the best. And I know for a fact there are a bunch of third-party Statham sculpts floating around, so I'll need to try and find one to try and really improve this figure. Now, moving on to the rest of the piece, let's start with the clothing. It's pretty good. The sweater is screen accurate and has that military style with the shoulder pockets and the built-in elbow pads. Now, these are solidly affixed to the clothing set, but you can see that the work isn't the best, and there's some gaps along the edges that almost make it look like the pads are falling off, but they're not. If I pull on these, they're really solidly on. Same holds true for the knee pads. They also have these gaps, but they're still solidly on. But I like the sweater, and even though it's all black, I do have to give Art Figures some credit because they made some good material choices here between the sections of the base sweater where the shoulder pads and the pockets hit, where it all seems a little distinctive. Now, the pants are held up by a brown belt, although with the figure fully kit up, that kind of disappears a little. But the pants are great too, showcasing a very modern BDU style pant with all the pockets, the built-in knee pads, and the Velcro ties at the ankles. And of course, the boots also do have some nice detail here. Body on this figure, though, isn't the best. He can stand well, but the shoulders definitely feel loose, and the upper body feels a little fragile. But of course, this isn't a figure you're going to display just like that. So let's also look at him fully kit up, and that's where, without a doubt, the figure shines. First of all, the beret definitely adds something to the sculpt. But so does the vest with the grenades and the gun holster on it, as well as just having the rifle hanging down low with that single point sling. And of course you can see the belt with the knives, the pack at his lower back, and even the 2 knives sticking out from the upper portion of his vest. It really does look nice, and once he's fully assembled, he definitely stands out. So, I mentioned this earlier, and I'm sure you can see them on display, but the hands actually include real fabric gloves. They're not molded, and we don't get any spares. And that's because the hands are actually posable. Not like the Iron Man hands that have joints at all the digits. This feels more like they're just flexible fingers, probably with some kind of a wire inside. Sure, it's not easy to get the hands to look perfect, but they do give you a lot of flexibility for display. Personally, I don't mind them, but I still think I prefer the alternate hands we get nowadays, where they're kind of custom molded to grip certain accessories. Since I do think they help the figure just look a little more natural, and the hands really stand out. Now, the one benefit here with these hands, no cumbersome or worrisome hand swaps. And dealing with terrible wrist joints on other figures is always a nightmare. So not having to do that here, I think, is a win. So just figured I'd point that out since it's not something very often seen with movie-based figures. But I have seen this type of hand used on military figures a lot, at least with the old Soldier Story releases. Now, figure does pose nicely, and one of the nicest things here is the ability to have the figure hold the rifle naturally. And you can even have the figure looking down the sights, so you're getting nice double jointed elbows. Although again, just to reiterate, the body feels a little cheaper. But he's able to essentially hold all of the accessories. And I will say this, at the time I got this figure, this was pretty cheap, even by third-party standards. So even though there are inaccuracies and the sculpt isn't the best, it wasn't a major disappointment. Sometimes when you don't pay much for these, you can forgive a lot of those issues. I think this is really a solid foundation to build on. And look, overall they captured that Lee Christmas likeness from the movie with all the tactical gear. Now he is missing the comm gear, so that'll be a little hard to come by, I think. But the rifle is almost there, and I think the key is going to be finding a suitable sculpt to replace this one with. I'm still hoping one of the big guys will actually give us a Statham sculpt at some point, but I think there are some good ones out there. And look, I'm open to recommendations from all of you as to which you think is the best, so please let me know. Even having him standing next to the Barney Ross figure, I think he goes well, and I do regret skipping on the other figures from the line. I think I always hope there would be better versions released, but that's part of the gamble we take when we pass on some of these figures when they get released. And of course, these have gone up on the secondary market, where with all the releases coming up, I just can't go back to pick these up. But I like him. I like this version of Lee Christmas. He's a fun figure to have and pose up, and even though he could seem a little bland to some, I think he looks good with the gear, and I love the poses you can attain with him, even the ones with the knives. So I think it's a pretty solid release overall. And if you like the Expendables, I feel like if there was any character people were going to invest in besides Sylvester Stallone, it was going to be Lee Christmas. He's essentially the second in command. So I think a very important figure. And I will say, with the Expendables 4 coming our way, I'm pretty sure Lee is taking command of the team and he'll be the lead going forward. The teaser for the movie makes note of appearance by Sly, and I do remember when the movie was filming that Stallone wrapped early, so is he just retiring, or are the Expendables going to lose their leader in the middle of a battle, requiring Lee to step up to the plate? So yeah, I'm excited for the series to continue, and I'm looking forward to watching. And for now, at least, I'm happy with the figure. Although this one, I'll be working on a little bit more before I'm fully satisfied. So that was a quick look at Lee Christmas from the Expendables 2. Let me know what you think about this one, and if you have any recommendations on good Jason Statham 6-scale sculpts. And as always, thanks for watching, and if you are enjoying the content, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, and we'll touch base on the next video.